I were Yiddish, I'd say, enough of this bread stuff. You know, we've had bread the last couple of Sundays in the gospel. And we've got it again today. Get ready to be coming in the next couple of Sundays as well. Jesus has used the bread as a metaphor to describe himself as he talked to the crowd that was following him. Last week, Jesus promised, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. And today we heard Jesus say, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats of this bread will live forever, and the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. Bread is such an enjoyable and common part of our life. You can go into any grocery store and just find aisles of all kinds of bread. From banana nut bread to French baguette. This week, just out of curiosity, I Googled kinds of bread. And the list that came back was over 150 different kinds of bread. Everything from something that I can't pronounce, ash merah, which is an Egyptian bread, I know you all know that, made from something called fenugreek seeds and maize, all the way down to zwabak, that crisp, sweetened bread from Germany that I remember our children gummed on as infants. The point is, bread is an integral part of our lives. It's a staple that sustains us. It nourishes us and strengthens our bodies. I dare say most of us eat bread in one form or another just about every day. We encounter bread, the smell, the taste, the texture of bread all around us. It permeates our lives. And bread was certainly a familiar staple for the people in Jesus' time. There are over 300 references to bread in the Bible. The people knew then, just like we know today, what physical hunger is and the need for food to sustain life. They knew that bread was a basic source for feeding that hunger and nourishing their bodies. And the people, of course, remembered the defining story in their history, the Exodus from Egypt, when God sustained his people in the wilderness for 40 years with manna or bread from heaven. Jesus' listeners understood bread for physical nourishment as well as we do. And they also understood bread of life to mean the word or the wisdom that comes from God down to humanity. And yet, they struggle to understand Jesus as bread metaphor every bit as much as we do. Like those first followers, we still don't understand the full implication of Jesus' words. I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry. Whoever eats of this bread will live forever. Well, what's Jesus talking about when he speaks of himself as bread? Well, I think what he's telling those first followers and what he's telling us is that if you want your deepest, most profound hunger satisfied, if you want that big old empty hole in your life filled, then feed on me. Take me into your life and into your heart. You know, that warm, fresh toast that I have for breakfast really does taste good every morning. And it does satisfy my hunger for a while. But then about mid-morning, my stomach starts to growl and I want something more to eat. I'm hungry again. I think a lot of us go through life like that. Just wanting to put something in our stomach, or in our house, or in our wallet. Just trying to find that something that feeds our hunger and completely satisfies. And yet, how often do we still feel hungry? Starving for something more. Jesus says, "Come to me. I will fill your empty lives and satisfy your heart's deepest hunger. Come to me, take me into your life, and you'll never be hungry again." You know, being able to name all 150 breads in the world isn't going to satisfy your hunger. And even being the best baker of bread in the world isn't going to keep your stomach from growling. You've got to eat the bread in order to stop being hungry. And I think Jesus is saying something of the same thing. Jesus is telling us that if you really want to know me, then take me into your life. Allow me to nourish you and transform you from the inside out. Every Sunday at church, we proclaim what Christians believe when we recite the Nicene Creed. For us and for our salvation, He came down from heaven by the power of the Holy Spirit. And He became incarnate. He became man. In other words, we Christians believe that God is not just some far-removed, distant deity sitting out there somewhere in a cloud looking down at us poor, lonely creatures. Jesus came in the flesh, and the people experienced Him in the flesh. Jesus distributed the bread of life through the sharing of Himself in real encounters with real everyday people. He shared meals with strangers and outcasts as well as friends and disciples. He gently touched a little girl's hand and lifted her from her deathbed. He took a little boy's basket and fed 5,000 with the bread and fish. He wept over the death of a friend. He challenged the complacent to care and be concerned for others. And He shared wine with friends at a wedding. He washed dirty feet. In other words, Jesus met people right where they were and shared Himself. He gave Himself as the bread of life. Jesus literally got involved in people's messy day-to-day lives. He didn't just think about people. He didn't even just pray about people. He got down and dirty in people's lives. He touched people at the point of their greatest need. It's the same for us today. If you want to experience God in your life and partake of the bread of life, then just look around you. God is all around you in the very real, the very fleshy, the very doughy experiences of life. God is all around us, waiting to be experienced. Waiting to be experienced in the people whose lives seemingly randomly intersect our own. You know, if you're watching and you're listening and you're attentive, you can encounter God anywhere. In your prayer life, on a solitary walk on the beach, hopefully here in church and worship. But I believe the primary way we encounter God is through relationships. That's what Jesus did. Jesus was all about relationships. Jesus shared the bread of life. He shared Himself with others through personal relationships, through the self-sacrificial giving of Himself. And that's what we're supposed to do. We're called to share the bread of love and compassion and forgiveness forgiveness with others. And it's in the sharing and the self-sacrifice, the giving of ourselves to others, that not only do we become in a relationship with them, but through that self-giving we begin to experience a more personal and intimate relationship with Christ himself. The writer of the letter to the Ephesians tells us that we're to imitate the self-giving that Christ has shown towards us. We're to live in love as Christ loved us and gave himself for us. We're to be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God has forgiven you. You know, there's a hunger crisis in our country. And I'm not just talking about the physical hunger, although statistics tell us that way too many people go to bed every night hungry in this great land of ours. But every night there are as many who go to bed suffering from spiritual malnutrition. They're desperately hungry for some meaning, some purpose for their lives. They're starving to know that someone cares about them, that someone loves them, that someone is willing to help them carry their burdens and share their problems. We're called to do that. We're called to share the bread of love and compassion and forgiveness with others. We're called to get involved. We're called to be God's hands to the world. We're called to be God's hands to reach out to a hungry world, to heal and to feed and to reconcile. And it may just mean that we have to get our hands dirty every now and then. Each one of us, each and every one of us, is being called to share the whole grain goodness of the good news, which is Jesus Christ. As our song we heard a few minutes ago, he will provide the finest bread. He will satisfy all heart's desires. He will give his life for us. Who will he send? Jesus is looking for some people to deliver his bread. We all have different delivery routes. And we'll all have the opportunity to meet many different people along our route this week. Some people will be familiar to us and some will be total strangers. But there's a world of hungry people out there. People desperately hungering for love, for forgiveness, for reconciliation, for hope, for peace, for relationship. People are starving to hear Jesus say to them, I'm your bread. Feed on me. We're not the bread. We're not what satisfies. Only Christ can do that. Christ provides the nourishment. But we are the delivery system. He will provide the finest bread that satisfies the deepest hunger. When he calls you to deliver the bread of his good news, what will your answer be? God grant us the grace to say, here I am. I will go, Lord, because I know that you're leading.